But first, tonight, Fox News is projecting that Hillary Clinton has, in fact, clinched the Democratic nomination. Now, she's getting ready to address supporters in Brooklyn, New York. First joining us, former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich, here with reaction. I watched a very different Donald Trump tonight. In that speech, I want to get your take on it.
Well, I thought that he was exactly what he should be. He was presidential. He was controlled. It was thoughtful. It was a set-piece speech. It's what people want from a president, because they want somebody they can rely on, who's thought it through, and who they can count on to follow through. I thought it was a very big step in the right direction, and I frankly felt very, very good about it.
You have been saying that he's got to transition from primary mode. And even David Axelrod, of all people, I actually found myself in agreement with some of his comments, which is very rare, suggesting that you got to transition from a primary mode into a general election mode. Do you feel he accomplished that tonight after a couple of tough days?
Well, I think he certainly made a huge step in the right direction. If he can stay on this path and stay this disciplined, he's going to be very formidable, and he's going to beat Hillary very badly this fall. She will not recover if she's caught up in a big issue election with a disciplined Donald Trump. They won't be in the same league.
You know, he talked a lot about very specific things, and the message was clear: putting America first on foreign policy, on energy, on the economy, fixing our schools, bringing back jobs, infrastructure, all of these things, America first, and here's what America first means. So there seems to be now he's drawing that line in the sand. All right, here's Hillary. She's corrupt. I'm giving a full speech on her on Monday, but this is what the differences are. So this is going to be a choice election.
Well, look, I think Hillary's version, which is sort of setting the international order first, whatever that means, is a huge contrast to Donald Trump putting America first. And I think that you can go through item after item and see how dramatically different they are. I also want to warn the Clinton people. They shouldn't assume that getting these delegates means the end of the game. Philadelphia is potentially a very, very contentious convention, and the Sanders people aren't going to go away. And I think, for example, there'll be a big vote over an anti-Israeli vote on the floor of the Philadelphia convention. And Hillary still has a long way to go before she gets secure control of her party. Trump
actually appealed to Bernie supporters, especially because he agrees with them on some of the bad trade deals America has made. And he actually talked about the Clintons winning in a rigged system. I would argue the superdelegate system is a rigged system. And, you know, when you have one candidate, the one with the coronation getting nearly 600 superdelegates and the other guy getting 50, clearly the establishment Democratic Party picked her from the get-go.
Well, at GingrichProductions.com, I wrote a newsletter last week talking about the idea of oligarchy versus democracy, and that ironically it's the Democrats who've decided to create this unique senior elite group that represents 40% of the votes you need to win the nomination. It's totally rigged. They're going to, I think, have to abolish it. I noticed that Elizabeth Warren came out the other day raising significant questions about it. A number of state parties are now opposing it. It's just a rigged game, and I think it further taints and corrupts the process by which Hillary is winning the nomination.
Do you think that Bernie has pushed her solidly enough to the left where she's far more uncomfortable than she otherwise would want to be at this point? Does that put her in a position that she grabs Bernie? Does she grab Elizabeth Warren to get on the ticket and run with her to appeal to the Bernie supporters that obviously feel disenfranchised?
Well, I think she's probably going to have either an African-American or a Latino vice presidential nominee. I think she's probably going to accept a platform much more radical than she would like, and Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are going to write a large part of that platform. But I think the bigger problem for Hillary Clinton is reality. Last Friday, we learned that the U.S. last month created one job for every 8,000 Americans. Now, an economy growing so slowly that you're only creating one new job for every 8,000 people, is an economy you can't defend, and yet she's trapped into defending it.
She's trapped into defending it because she's defended it all along, as she has defended the horrible foreign policy agenda, which Donald Trump went into, and that includes Iraq, the creation of ISIS, and Libya, and straight on down the line. But I think it's even worse than that, because 1 in 5 American families don't have a single family member in the workforce. 1 in 6 young American males 18 to 34 are either incarcerated or out of work. We've doubled the national debt. Obama will accumulate more debt than every other president before him combined. 12.4 million more people on food stamps, 10 million more people in poverty. I don't know how you run on those statistics. How do you run on those numbers? And don't those people that maybe bought into change, don't they feel the suffering and maybe realize that they were sold a bill of goods?
Well, that's where Donald Trump has a huge opportunity to run a very big issue campaign to go into those neighborhoods. I mean, go in the neighborhoods where people are unemployed. Go in the neighborhoods, for example, Chicago's had a 50% increase in shootings this year. Just to run in there and say, wouldn't you like to have a president who cared enough to try to stop the killings? Might be very attractive to African Americans in Southside Chicago who have been totally neglected by Hillary Clinton, who's, by the way, a native of Chicago, and totally neglected by Barack Obama, who came from Chicago.
Yeah. Let me ask, you have said many times in this program that Donald Trump's at his best when he thinks big, when he goes big. Yeah, I want you to expand on that thought, because especially in light of the controversy this week, and you were critical on Sunday, and I noticed, you know, the Republicans that wouldn't fight Obama were quick to jump on Donald Trump, which bothers me somewhat, because if they would have fought Obama as hard as they're fighting Trump, maybe they would have stopped some of Obama's agenda, but that's a different story. But more specifically, what did you mean by going big versus small?
Well, offering the kind of infrastructure program that a great builder like Donald Trump could imagine, whether it's ports, highways, railroads, rebuilding America so we're a first world country again, so we're the most competitive nation in the world, rethinking all of the regulatory process to make it easy for small businesses to get started. Trump understands exactly the importance of small businesses, and he could become the small business candidate while Hillary is the bureaucratic red tape candidate, doing what he is doing. Let's get it up here to this level. He wants to put America first. She wants to put some vague, confusing internationalism first. He wants real results. He thinks that Libya is a failure. What does she think? He thinks that Somalia is a failure. What does she think? If he gets it up to that level and keeps it at that level, he's going to beat her badly, because the results are so terrible at every level, including, by the way, in the Latino community, where you can really go in and talk about jobs and education and health care and have a very strong audience that wants their children to have a better future.
All right, let me ask you a deeper question, especially if we're going to put America first in foreign policy. I was a supporter of the Iraq War, although I always liked Trump's idea of having them pay for it and give us the oil, especially for military families that have sacrificed so much. But if we don't learn from Vietnam, where we lost 58,000 people and we pulled out early and we didn't win the war, if we win Mosul, Tikrit, Fallujah, and Ramadi, only to have another president politicize the war, pull out, and allow ISIS to take its place, the very cities Americans fought, bled, and died for, American treasure, do we really have to now consider the idea that America doesn't have the stomach for any long, protracted type of conflict in light of those two recent examples?
No, I think what we have to say is Americans are very much in favor of wars that are unavoidable. World War II, where the Japanese attacked us.
Different story.
Right after 9/11. And Americans are very much for smart wars. Remember, Ronald Reagan built up the American military dramatically. He never engaged in a big conflict. He was very, very careful. I don't think Trump wants to run from ISIS. Trump wants to take American firepower, American intelligence capabilities, work with the Saudis, the Turks, and others, and destroy ISIS. But one of the differences is Trump is prepared to recognize that Russia's a real player.
You see,
so Trump would say
that's a more intelligent approach,
ISIS
isn't it?
is more important than being irritated with Putin.
You're the historian. Isn't that the more intelligent approach in light of how we've now learned that wars can be politicized halfway through, and that the American public appetite for long-term conflict doesn't exist?
Look, 500 years before Christ, Sun Tzu wrote The Art of War, which is the most classic treatise on warfare.
Right.
And he says in there, There are no good long wars.
Yeah.
We've been at war now for 14 years since 9/11. If this was World War II, this would be 1955. If we were still fighting Imperial Japan in 1955, we would be torn apart as a country. So I think Trump has an instinct here.
I agree with you.
Be very
That's what I'm
careful,
saying.
rebuild your military,
Yeah.
build up your allies and insist that they take their share of the burden, and then do things decisively with minimum risk to Americans. I think that's close to what Eisenhower and Reagan believed in.